cool thing is that like later on, I would go on to work with four or five of the photographers whose work was
Wow.
featured in that book. We would have sometimes upwards of 30 lights.
Welcome, everybody, to the second episode of a photography podcast. And we have with us David from Japan. David was nice enough to agree to come on. I posted it in one of the Facebook groups, and I'm really excited to talk to him. So let's start and say hi to David. Hi, David. Thank you for being on.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. Happy to be
Yeah,
here. Yeah.
it's as I was telling you off camera right now, it's really exciting for me to be able to talk to photographers from around the world and see their journey, see how they got into this and what drives them, what gear they're using, what's their favorite type of photography, all those typical questions we all have. So, my first question to you, David, is what are you doing in Japan?
So that's a long conversation already. Uh,
We can make it short
basically,
though. Yeah.
basically what happened was, like in the 90s when I was in high school and I was really getting interested in photography, uh, I kept noticing that I kept kind of running across photographers and other artists from Japan. And that
Yeah.
kind of and it just kept happening and it just kind of became like this kind of guiding force in my life. And
Yeah.
after university, I thought, oh, maybe I'll, go over to Japan, see what's up. Uh, I ended up going to several other countries first, but I did eventually get here.
Really?
And yeah, it's just been a weird ride. I
Yeah.
originally thought I was gonna go from like Ohio, yeah, kind of Midwest US, from Ohio to Japan after I finished school. I went from Ohio to Missouri to Texas to Korea to Taiwan to Chicago to Shanghai, and then finally to Japan over the course of about 12 years. So
Wow.
it just
Wow.
eventually I got here, but yeah, it was not direct. But
It
I've been
wasn't.
here since 2015, and I'm not going anywhere.
Well, wow, that's a long time, 9 years. And
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're not going anywhere, that means you really like it, huh?
yeah, yeah,
How,
and yeah, I now live, just outside of Tokyo, and I just I like it here. That's
that's amazing.
it's life is good.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, so Japan's supposed to be an awesome place. I've never been. I know you're in a city called Saitama. That's
Mm.
right outside Tokyo, right? So that's awesome that you really like life there. Before we get into all the other things of what's going on, tell me about your journey into photography. When did that start, and how did that start?
I mean, as a child, I always remembered that pictures were interesting. And I think
Yeah,
that's pretty common for among photographers. Like, you, we always had like National Geographic magazine lying around, and like I would look at them, and they were just like, wow, there's so much to see and everything. But I never really thought about taking pictures. But then between junior high school and high school,
yeah,
we moved to a different part of the country, and I didn't have any friends. I had the whole summer. I had nothing to do. But in the move, I found like my dad's old camera, the Minolta SLR. That's like, oh,
yeah.
want to figure out how this works. So they got me some film. I started taking pictures. Like, oh, this is kind of fun.
Yeah.
And then it very quickly became an obsession.
Oh,
And
really?
I know, and like at
How
first,
old were you
a
then?
lot of 14. So I was
Okay.
14. So
So it became an obsession at 14. Okay.
yeah, yeah, and I at first I was really interested primarily, honestly, in the technical side because I was really into science before that, and it's like, well, how does photography work? And so I really dove into that, and I devoured every book at the public library. I read everything I could, and at this time, this is also when kind of the internet is becoming a thing where there's discussion forums and people are talking about photography online. So like from like 1996 onward, I was just into it completely. And it's never stopped since then. And that's it's been
Wow.
what, like
So
28 years.
96, that is awesome. You started with film, obviously. There's no doubt about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And that's what you learned on. You learned on film.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And like to the point where like even up through when I went to university for photography and like most of my coursework I shot on like 4x5 transparencies. Like I was using a view camera every day and
that's
sending off
amazing.
film to a lab every week. It was nuts.
That's
It
amazing.
was fantastic, but very different from the scene now, which is also
Yeah,
good, but
yeah,
different for sure.
yeah, yeah. And like a majority of photographers right now, they don't know what film's like. Because so many people,
Mm.
like, they're even born after that, but who are doing photography even professionally right now. But film is something, it's coming back though, which is interesting.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, kind of like a hobby or kind of a interesting kind of category in photography. And I noticed you're into film photography. I went on your Insta and your website and stuff. So you're shooting on film even now, aren't you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's hard at the moment. The Japanese economy is not doing well and everything's extra expensive. So I'm not shooting as much film, but yeah, I'm trying to keep up with it. It's fun.
Yeah.
And you know, the the results that you get with film, I mean, I think there is something to that aspect of it. That if you shoot it exactly the same picture on a digital camera and a film camera, you're going to get something different. And it's not that film is better, it's just different, right?
Yeah.
But for me, the thing that really carries a lot of weight for this, why I keep doing it, is that I like the lack of feedback when I'm shooting. Like
Okay.
I can't look at a
Yeah.
histogram.
Yeah.
I can't look at a histogram. I can't check that I get the focus.
Yeah.
I have to trust
Your skills.
in my ability. I have to trust in the skills that I've built. And it's not just even at the time of exposure. Did I focus it right? Did I expose it correctly? Did I get anything, all these things right at the time of exposure? But after that, I still have to develop it. I have to scan it. You know, there's a,
Yeah.
still a journey
It's a
ahead,
process.
and none of it is done for me. So like if I don't get it right, it doesn't work. And I like that it requires me to keep my skills at a certain level.
It's the thrill. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, and but it's also very relaxing because you have to let go. Like
Yeah.
you have to just kind of say, well, like I'm gonna based on what I know, I'm gonna do it this way. And if it works, fantastic. If it doesn't, maybe I can learn from trying to figure out why it didn't work.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's really a very healthy way to approach any creative uh, thing that you're trying to make it work, but it's not always going to work. Most of the time, it's not going to work.
True. True.
Uh,
So right now, is photography your full-time gig? Is that your profession, or do you do something else as well?
right now, I'm in a weird position. So back in the U.S., I've done some like commercial photography myself, but mostly I've done photo assisting professionally, like in the U.S. Whereas I'm working for some really fantastic photographers and I'm handling all of their lighting, all the technical side of everything so they can concentrate on making the picture on these. Some of these are like really big like advertising shoots, architecture for, you know, these incredible clients. But I'm handling all the technical stuff and I that suits me because I like the technical stuff. But
Interesting.
after kind of leaving the US, like after Lehman shock, like was that like 16 years ago or something? Uh, which is when I first left the US because everything fell apart. Uh, and I was offered a job in Korea, so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go. So I went and I started teaching English, and it's really been a lucky thing for me that this is something that I was able to take to different places. And originally I came to Japan to teach English, um, or at least that's how I got here. And I was building certain things up, and then of course COVID hits, and again everything falls apart. Uh,
Yeah.
and I ended up
For all of us.
basically working in kind of teaching English, but honestly it's mostly childcare. Uh, but I work kind of at an after school facility right now. But fortunately with the hours there, I can still get out and work on my photography and other creative stuff. Uh, and so yeah, right now, no, I'm I'm not a professional photographer technically right now, but it's something I really want to get back to. I want to get my studio going sometime this year because as
Yeah.
much as I like the kids at my job, I'm going crazy and I have to get out. So
Okay.
fortunately I
Yeah.
have photography. I can go back to that.
Yeah, that's true. That's a skill that'll always be there for all of us. A lot of
Mm.
us photographers kind of do other work as well. Sometimes they have to leave it for a while, but there's many who just do this 100% full time. So that's really interesting that right now you're not dependent on your photography for your living. That's cool. But you want to start your studio again. Was there a time that you were 100% dependent on your photography?
I mean, not not really. Like I've always done a mix of stuff because if I spend too much time doing one thing, like my brain gets bored. I kind of burn out on like one thing if I'd spend too much time doing that one thing. Uh, so it's kind of always been a mix. I think the closest I've gotten to that was basically like back in Chicago when I was, assisting some really amazing photographers and then, shooting some on the side as well. So like everything I was doing was from photography, related to photography. But
Yeah, yeah.
I there's some people in photography who are just incredible at like the business side of it.
Yes, yes.
I am not that person.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
I'm the person that they look at and they think like, why is he so bad at that? Like,
A lot of
'cause
us, a lot of us. Yeah,
the photography I've got the skills, I've got the passion. I love photography, but in terms of making it work as a business, I'm still figuring that out. But fortunately, I don't have to depend on it. I have other things going, so and that's kind of a luxury. So
yeah,
it's a mixed
yeah.
bag.
We're creatives. You can't
Yeah,
expect all the creatives to be good at business as well. But I think gradually, the more you do it, you kind of, get better at that side as well. Because I've done
of
that.
course, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of a commercial photographer full time in a way. I do video as well and stuff. But it took time. But I did come from agencies, from ad agencies. I used to be the creative
Mm,
director in some ad agencies. So I had that kind of advantage. I already knew the pricing and stuff. But it'd be
mm.
great if somebody handled the business side and business development, which I don't do. Business development, I think, is like the hardest part for me. I don't like to go and kind of try to get work. I'd rather them come to me. But, anyways, coming back to you, what I really want to know is that in Japan, in Saitama or Tokyo, you'll be familiar with that. How difficult or easy do you think it would be to be a full-time commercial photographer? Do you know any photographers like that? Or if you were to do that, since you're thinking of making a studio, what do you think the prospect is over there?
I mean, like, I think it's one thing about like Tokyo that I think is important for people to remember, like regardless of the topic even, is that Tokyo is kind of like, like New York City or Shanghai or these other global cities that it's
Yeah,
like it's part of Japan, but it's not indicative of Japan. Like the way things work in Tokyo is not representative of
interesting.
Japan, because it's
Yeah,
just it's its own ecosystem. It operates in a certain way. Uh, but I know a few full-time professional photographers here, other immigrants actually, and
Yeah.
I don't know what they would give as advice, but in fact, it might be interesting people for you to talk to. But one thing that I've noticed is that there is, and yeah, so this could be completely wrong, but what I have observed personally seems to be that there is a certain level of trust that you get from clients when you are associated with something larger than an individual. Like back in the US, I know a lot of, very successful photographers who are basically still just individuals. They're not part of a company.
Hmm.
They might have an agent, but they're not like
Yeah.
the agent, like their name is bigger than the agent's name.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I get that.
but
Interesting.
but at least in like researching like the commercial photography market in Japan, it seems that most everybody has representation,
Okay.
or I mean, at least in terms of like commercial work, because that's what I've researched. Um,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
trying to research like who's out there, what are they doing, I much more often came up with agencies than like the websites of individual creators.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of those things that's a difference from how things work where I'm from, and I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure that out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, for like people doing like portrait work or you know, I mean, it's still professional photography, but it's kind of away from like the corporate stuff, the advertising stuff, that kind of stuff. That there seems to be there's much more leeway in terms of how you may be able to find work because you're going to be dealing more with, individuals as clients rather than,
Yeah.
companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's then you're kind of in the wild west of the internet, just like everybody else, where it's like, how good is your copy on your website? What's your SEO like? What is your marketing strategy and what are people seeing? Uh, and it's like in that regard, it kind of seems about like anywhere else, really.
Okay.
Like
That's interesting.
like in terms of like the advertising stuff, that's where I've seen kind of a different landscape than what I'm used to in the US. But everything else, it really seems to be really mixed. Like
How is that? How's the advertising different in Tokyo from the US? What do you mean by that?
I mean, you know, it, in my experience, working with photographers, shooting campaigns, um, the photographers that I've worked with on these things, it's not that they're part of like a photography company. Uh, whereas where you have whereas like an agency and you have certain photographers working there. Like that's something that you often seem to see here, at least from what I've observed. Uh, but in the US, it seems to be much more of like an open ecosystem where you've got, you know, if you've got a good portfolio and people like what you're doing, it doesn't matter if you're not represented by anybody even. Some
In the
big
US.
corporation who, yeah, and in the US, like they
Okay.
may
So
come to you regardless of that.
you can be an individual in the US and get
Yeah,
good work, big work, but in Tokyo you have to need some representation, perhaps.
okay, that's what it looks like to me.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's again like I've done a bit of commercial work with smaller clients here, uh, mostly through personal connections that I had.
Yeah.
So like I'm not really like operating in that yet, but that's really kind of what
Hmm.
it looks like to me
Okay.
from
Interesting.
where I
Okay.
stand. Which,
Yeah. So David, tell me
yeah.
something. If you did get back into commercial photography, full time or something, what type of photography are you into? Do you do like food, architecture, or like, or is it just commercial, which can kind of includes almost everything in some ways?
Well, there's certain things I definitely have interest in, like anything kind of tabletop still life. I like working in a very controlled environment, so there's that.
Yeah,
Uh,
me too.
and actually, and also like architecture is huge for me. Like I would love to be doing architectural work. Um,
Yeah, I asked you this
as
because
you
I
may
saw
know,
your Insta. Your work, I saw it. It's you have food, you have architecture, you have landscape. These three things I noticed.
yeah.
So yeah, that's what I thought. Okay,
But the
go
the
on.
thing the thing with the architectural photography at the moment is I can't afford the equipment. So,
Okay.
like the
Yeah.
optics alone, that's
What would you
yeah,
need?
but it's I mean really it's not a ton, but it's three or four lenses, ideally a new camera with a bit more resolution would be nice. Uh, and the thing too though is also with architectural work, there's a lot of different styles, and in terms of lighting especially, like the way that I've lit stuff in the past is pretty minimal. I'll add some fill here and there, but I really like to use the existing light and kind of balance things out as best I can that way. But at the same time, I used to work for a guy, a commercial photographer in Chicago, kind of a specialist in architectural photography, and we would sometimes spend 4 or 5 hours lighting a single shot. We would have sometimes upwards of 30 lights. Uh,
Wow.
we would have cables hidden everywhere. We would spend hours, making sure that every office chair, that the base of it was oriented in a certain way. Like the the attention to detail was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But like part of the reason why his work looks the way he work looks is that it's lit in a certain way. And I'm not saying that I don't have an interest in going that far, but I'd like a few more lights. But like
Yeah, I get it.
and if each light is like $1,000, I I gotta eat,
Yeah,
So it's
that's
so it,
that's crazy that having so many lights. It's not crazy. I think it's fantastic that he did it. But for me to
no no it
imagine,
like
putting up
he,
30 lights,
he's
wow.
an incredible photographer, but and so like I learned a lot from him, but also, but to kind of get back to the thing, like I've got everything I need to do, still life, product, tabletop, that kind of stuff. I've got that on hand. I can do that. And that's not where my biggest interest lies, but that is kind of maybe where I begin to grow the business, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And from there you branch out, you know,
Okay.
as the equipment situation improves a bit.
Hmm.
Because I mean I can't shoot architecture with only a 90 millimeter PC lens. That doesn't work.
Yeah,
As
I
much as
can
I love
imagine.
that lens, it's a fantastic lens, but they're going to be like, why is everything far away?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but architecture is your big dream in a way. Is that what you meant?
Yeah,
That's what you.
I think that's a fair thing
Okay.
to get. Like, I don't know what I'm saying.
No, it's
But,
like that.
but,
None of
but
us do.
I think that's right. I think
Yeah,
that's right.
that's really
That,
nice.
that
Thank you.
was like when I was in university and up to a certain point, I had been really focused on advertising photography. And then there's actually a book called Building Images, and it was put out by the Chicago architectural photography firm Hedrick Blessing in the 90s. And it is an example, like it's a compilation of work over the span of nearly 100 years of architectural work done by members of this firm. And it's one of those things where you see certain people's work and you think, "Oh, I didn't know you could do that with
Yeah,
photography." And
I
something
understand.
changes in your brain. And that's kind of where I got interested in architectural photography because my university library had a copy of this book. I looked at it one afternoon. I went back to my dorm room at the university. I immediately ordered my own copy. And the cool thing is that like later on, I would go on to work with four or five of the photographers whose work was
Wow.
featured in that book, including the guy with a million lights. Like
That's
it's just
awesome.
like,
That's
oh,
awesome. And yeah,
now I get to see how it's made. How do you do this?
yeah,
And if the
yeah.
question is how do you do this for that style, the answer is extremely carefully. Nothing is an accident.
Wow.
And
Wow. Yeah,
it's a working within that kind of environment is just
yeah,
incredible. And yeah, so I just at some point architecture got me, and it's still in
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Uh, I want to get back to it, but
yeah. You
we'll get
know,
there.
if I ever do architecture, I'm completely at the mercy of nature. I barely use any light. It's always natural, and there's a bit of post involved, but that just goes to show you that I'm not an architectural photographer. I do it if somebody paid me to do it, but it would be, just whatever
But
happen to make
but
do.
it's interesting because there's also a huge variety of styles, and I've noticed like if you look at like lifestyle magazines in Japan, and interestingly, like, Japan still has a lot of print media. Like there's
Really,
magazines coming out
that's
all the
interesting.
time, like constantly. Just, like if if you imagine like a big bookstore in like the 90s, early 2000s, there was just like so many magazines that were everywhere. It's still like that in Japan. And they're all extremely like specialist interest magazines.
Amazing.
It's it's unbelievable sometimes just how focused these things are. But like if you look at like the major lifestyle magazines and you see like the architecture and interior photography down there, it's much more of a natural approach to it. Like they're using the natural light, they're using the existing artificial light in the structure.
Hmm.
And I'm sure they're doing some lighting,
Hmm.
but it feels much more like, oh, this is what it's actually like in there. Not, oh, this is what an idealized, really beautiful, but like not really realistic version of what this space is looks like. And so I really appreciate that about it. And I think it points out that,
Yeah,
it's not that lighting the crap out of everything is wrong, but like that's one way of doing it.
yeah, yeah,
And taking it more of just relaxed, natural way where you're still paying a lot of attention. You're still working carefully, but you're not, you're just trying to work with what you have for the most part rather than do a certain thing with it.
yeah.
Right.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So,
That's really interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So coming back to your food and your product, what kind of gear do you have? You say you have that. You're ready for that. What do you use right
I mean,
now?
I mean, I have a Sony A7R second generation, so it's
Uh, yeah,
a bit old, but it works. Beautiful files. Uh, but like specifically to like this work, I've got some strobes, I've got one monolight, I've got a small like pro photo kit, uh,
yeah.
from the 80s, which I bought
Really,
used
pro
for like
photo.
no money. Oh yeah, no, and because I love pro photo, and I was at a secondhand shop in Tokyo, and like they had like a pack and two heads for like the equivalent of like $200. Like, okay, I'm leaving with that. And it's great. It's
Hell yeah.
great. Yeah, and so like, and I've got light stands and some modifiers and stuff, but like, and yeah, and I've got some lenses. I've got, and the most important one is I got the Canon, the TSE 90 millimeter, the first gen, but it's still a very sharp lens.
That's a fantastic
Uh,
lens. Absolutely. Yeah.
and I mean, and really, like when you're dealing with, constructing little scenes, little worlds on tabletop,
Yeah.
you can you can adjust everything else around that. So if your lighting isn't perfect, who cares? You can make it work. Like you don't have a soft box. Okay, find a bed sheet. You shoot something through that.
Yeah. Exactly.
If you're working in a studio, you have the benefit of time and flexibility. You can figure it out. So whatever kind of gear you have, you can make it
Yeah,
work.
that's true.
And and beyond, I got a camera, got a lens, I got some lights. I I spent way too much money on a new laptop last year, so
Really
that works for now.
awesome.
You
What
know,
what laptop is it, by the way?
it's the 14-inch MacBook Pro, the M2 that came out about a year ago.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Uh,
awesome.
and
Absolutely.
I love it, although I'm looking at it now and it is dusty. I need to clean this thing.
So is mine. I just changed my laptop as well, and I went to get a 14 inch, the same thing you have, and I ended up getting a 16 inch, which I didn't want to do. It's
Mm.
not good for portability, but this thing's screen is just so nice. It's like a
Oh,
little
oh yeah,
cinema
yeah.
in front of you. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's not
really
great for
enjoying
walking
doing this.
around, but
No way, it's
it's
so
better for,
heavy.
it's better for everything else.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I hope
And I
you
got a good
enjoy that.
deal.
That's going to be nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent,
Absolutely.
excellent.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I went through your Insta and your website as well. I really liked what I saw. I saw some of your architecture. I saw some of your food stuff, and there was one in which what was it? It was like a lot of I think obviously Japanese food and stuff, and it was this dark environment. And I was wondering, did you plan that shoot? Did you kind of like quickly art direct it? Or was it that at a restaurant? How did you do that?
So that um so actually that's as an English teacher, I have some private students, and one of the guys that I teach is kind of a very successful businessman who also has a hotel, and he asked me like, "Hey, do you want to come shoot the food at my hotel?" And it turned out to be a really bad job in terms of like pay, amazingly. But
Yeah,
but like they just like, okay, you can just let's shoot this, and they just kept bringing in stuff from the hotel kitchen for like an entire afternoon. It's like, all right, I'm gonna shoot this, I'm gonna shoot this, and I just kept going with it. Uh, so yeah, I shot about 10 different kind of meals in the course of about 2.5 hours. Uh, and that was
yeah, that was
exhausting,
cool.
but
No,
I liked what I got from it at least. So there's that.
no, that was a fantastic shoot. I really enjoyed seeing that one.
Like
And he did a bunch
I
more.
really want to do
Mhm.
more of that. I really want to do more of that, but it's
Yeah,
if
yeah.
I'm shooting at home, I got to shoot my own cooking, and it may taste good, but it doesn't look so nice as that.
I know what you mean. Absolutely. So, but that was all on digital, right? When
Yeah,
does
yeah,
film
yeah.
come
So
in?
same.
When does film come
I
in for you?
like film is kind of a me thing for the most part, unless like
Okay, yeah,
occasionally I'll be somebody wanted me to do like some kind of portrait stuff, and I'll always shoot some film with that. One because I like how it looks, but also when the client understands enough about like, okay, this is film. I have 12 of these shots. Each shot costs a certain amount of money. I'm not billing you for this because it's something I want to do, but like
yeah,
they
yeah,
understand like, oh, I have to actually take this more seriously in the moment. And I find I just get better results with it that way
yeah,
because
yeah,
they're being more sincere in the moment. So it's there. I mean, I love film and it has certain advantages, but some of the advantages are kind of weird. It's like every time I press this button, it costs me money. Take it
yeah.
seriously. So it's,
I know what you mean.
but it, but then you get something beautiful anyway. So I with film, if I could, if I woke up tomorrow with a ton of money, one thing I would do, I would just go buy some film for one thing, because it's fun. It's fun, and it's not something. It's something that I never stopped doing. In the 90s, that's how I started. And yeah, most of my stuff now is digital, but I've never stopped doing film. And I just like that, everything in photography is a tool. And now in photography, the toolbox is huge. We have so many options. Like since like the 1840s, photography has always been evolving, but we have never had more choices than now. We can do anything we want. And it's an incredible gift. And I think people should go out and play with it and just see what they can do with whatever seems fun to play with, you know?
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. So tell me something. You told me that you want to stay in Japan, but I have this question
Yeah.
I'm asking everybody. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Here, basically. I mean, well, I
That's
mean,
great. You know it. So
I
no
mean,
confusion.
in terms of country for sure, and I just actually, or just earlier this year on Valentine's Day, I got married. Uh,
Oh,
and
wow.
so
Congratulations.
like my life is becoming more, concrete here. And yeah, I one way or another, I will be here. I would guess probably in the Saitama area, but maybe more countryside if I can work out a way to run a like photo studio that's commercially successful, but also in the middle of nowhere. That'd be nice to figure out.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm
Cool.
hoping that one way or another, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, I'm shooting as much as I want to shoot. I'm making work that matters to me, and I'm living where I want to live. And so that last part, that's easy. All I have to do is not leave. Uh, the rest of it,
Fantastic.
I just want to figure out like now, okay, how do I make the business part of things work?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what I'm working on now.
That's fantastic. That's really interesting. I think that kind of wraps up all my questions. Um, I think it was a really fun conversation. I really enjoyed
I hope so. I hope so.
talking to you and learning about your journey and what you're up to right now. I definitely might have you on again at some point.
Yeah, I'd be
And
happy to anytime. Like I said before, if we're talking
yeah,
about photography,
yeah,
I I will
100%.
always say yes. I
And
will
we'll check
always
up
say yes to talking.
on the status of your studio.
Yeah, but give me a few months. Give me a few months though.
I will definitely. But thanks for coming on, David. And it was
All
a pleasure to
right.
have you. And
Well,
till
I'm
next,
happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
yeah, till next time then, all right?
All righty. Sounds good.
Okay, take care. See you.
You
Bye.
too. Thank you.